They say silence can be louder than words. I learned that the day I stepped off my own private jet, holding my 5-year-old daughter's hand, and saw my father freeze at the sight of us. His mouth opened, but no words came out, just stunned silence. 7 years earlier, that same man had shouted in my face, "You're a disgrace," slapped me, and kicked me out of the house because I refused to obey the life plan he had crafted for me. I didn't argue. I didn't scream. I just left, carrying nothing but my sketchbook, my dream of becoming an architect, and the sting of that slap on my face. Now, after building a company from scratch, after raising my daughter without them, I was back. Not for revenge, not even for closure, but because my daughter deserved to see where her mother came from and decide for herself what to keep and what to leave behind. My father believed he could draft my life like one of his business plans, clean lines, zero surprises, and absolutely no deviations. He was a man of order, of profit, of prestige. Everything in our home reflected that: the cold marble floors, the sterile perfection of the furniture, the eerie silence that came with a life designed for appearances, not people. I was the only unexpected element in his otherwise well-curated portfolio. From the moment I turned 13, my life became a project he tried to control. He enrolled me in economics courses while other girls were exploring theater or music. When I wanted to take an elective in architectural drawing, he laughed. "That's what people with no real future do for fun," he said, shaking his head over his Wall Street journal. "You're a Sinclair. We build companies, not coffee shops or cathedrals." But even then, I was sketching floor plans in the margins of my notebooks, dreaming of light, texture, and space, imagining places that felt like freedom. My mother, Linda, stood somewhere between terrified and tired. She wasn't cruel like him, but she was complicit. She whispered support when he wasn't around, but shrank like a shadow whenever he entered the room. "Just keep your head down, Avery," she'd whisper, folding laundry with mechanical precision. "One day, you'll get to make your own choices." But that day never came, at least not in their house. By the time I was 17, I had quietly started compiling a portfolio of my best designs models I made from scrap cardboard, digital renderings stitched together from stolen hours on the school's computers. I didn't tell anyone. Not my parents, not my guidance counselor, not even my friends. It was mine, untouched by anyone else's expectations. When college applications opened, I secretly applied to the Rhode Island School of Design. I knew it was a long shot. I didn't have an elite art school resume, but I had passion and I had a voice. And sometimes that's all you need. The acceptance letter arrived in a slim envelope I almost didn't open. I remember holding it under the fluorescent light in the kitchen while my father was in his office yelling at his assistant over the phone. My hands were shaking as I read the words. "We are pleased to offer you admission." I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just closed the envelope and placed it inside my sketchbook. I knew this changed everything. And I also knew exactly how he'd react. It took me 3 days to gather the courage to tell him. I rehearsed it in my head dozens of times, how I'd calmly explain why I didn't want to follow him into real estate, how I had my own dreams, how architecture wasn't some hobby for losers. It didn't matter. The moment I said the words, "I want to go to RISD and study architecture," his expression collapsed into something unrecognizable: disappointment, fury, humiliation, all at once. "Are you out of your mind?" he said, standing up so fast his chair screeched backward. "No," I replied quietly. "I'm finally in it." That's when it happened. The slap came first, hard and fast across my left cheek, then the scream, "You're a disgrace." I staggered back, more stunned than hurt. I stared at him, speechless, not because I didn't have words, but because I refused to waste them. I looked at my mother. She didn't meet my eyes. "Get out," he said, "and don't come back until you're ready to be part of this family." So I left. I packed my sketchbook, the acceptance letter, and the small box of money I'd saved from tutoring gigs and holiday jobs. $1, $200 total. Not much, but enough to get a bus ticket and the cheapest Airbnb near Providence. I didn't even cry until the bus doors shut behind me. That night, as the bus rattled through towns I didn't know, I pulled my sketchbook onto my lap and flipped through its pages. There were pages of rough drawings, some terrible, some promising, but all of them felt more real than anything I had ever said at our dinner table. I wasn't just running away from home. I was walking into the life I wanted to build, brick by brick, line by line. The first morning in Providence felt like both freedom and fear wrapped in the same sunrise. I woke up in a stranger's spare bedroom, the mattress lumpy, the sheets a little stiff with bleach, but I had slept like the dead. My body was sore from hauling my bag, and my mind still echoed with my father's voice. "You're a disgrace." I didn't have time to dwell. I had $900 left after paying for 3 weeks at the Airbnb, and I hadn't eaten anything besides trail mix and vending machine crackers. I'd mapped out the RISD campus the night before and planned to visit the financial aid office and student housing in person. I wasn't enrolled yet for housing they'd assumed I'd be with family. That part had made me laugh bitterly when I first read it. The woman behind the counter at student services had sympathetic eyes. "There's a wait list for dorms, but we have a few local student housing options with sliding scale rent. And we have a work-study coordinator if you're eligible. I'll take anything," I said, gripping the strap of my bag. Over the next few days, I moved into a crumbling brownstone just off campus that housed 4 other art students. The rent was cheap, $250 a month for a room the size of a closet, and it came with roaches, a permanently broken radiator, and a window that wouldn't close all the way. But it was mine. I shared a bathroom with 2 girls studying painting and a guy who built giant metal sculptures in the backyard. They were loud, chaotic, and kind. None of them asked about my parent, and that alone made me feel safe. By day, I threw myself into classes design theory, 3D modeling, architectural history. I stayed after lectures to ask questions, lingered in the studio until midnight, sketching and redrafting. I lived on black coffee and peanut butter sandwiches. Most nights, I fell asleep to the sound of the girl upstairs rehearsing her cello. It became a kind of lullaby. My favorite class was taught by Professor Langley, a tall woman with silver braids and the sharpest eye I'd ever met. She tore apart my first concept design. "This doesn't breathe," she said, holding my model between 2 fingers. "You're building a cage, not a space. Try again." I stayed up until 3 a.m. reworking it. When I brought in the new model the next week, she said nothing for a moment. Then she gave a single nod. "Better. Now we can start." That nod meant everything. Still, outside of class, the real world didn't make room for creative dreams. I picked up a job at a nearby cafe, working the 5:30 a.m. shift 4 days a week. I mopped floors, served scones to professors, and refilled the drip machine until my hands smelled like burnt espresso. I also took on freelance jobs flyers for student events, logos for startups run out of dorm rooms, even a wedding invitation designed for a barista's cousin. Every cent counted. I budgeted down to the dollar: rent, utilities, art supplies, groceries. I used the same sketch pencils for months, sharpening them with a razor blade instead of wasting an inch to a sharpener. My mother sent one email in those first few months: "I hope you're safe. Your father is still angry. If you need help, I can wire you money, just don't tell him." I didn't respond, not because I didn't want to, but because I knew any acceptance of her offer would come with invisible strings. And I'd already severed the rope tying me to that house. I couldn't go backward. By December, Rhode Island turned icy. I patched the window with packing tape and cardboard. Some nights I wore 2 sweaters and gloves to bed. One night, I ran out of space heater fuel and used tea light candles inside an aluminum tray for warmth, an idea I'd seen online. Not safe, not smart, but it worked. Then came the moment that shifted everything. I was working the morning shift, sleep deprived and sketching in my notebook during a lull. A man in a worn pea coat and tortoiseshell glasses ordered a black coffee and a cranberry muffin. When I handed him his change, he glanced down at the sketch on my pad. It was a cross-section of a community library I'd been dreaming up: open skylights, timber framing, reading nooks that felt like tree houses. "Is that your design?" he asked. I froze. "Yes." He smiled faintly. "I used to teach at Cooper Union. Mind if I look closer? That's how I met Nathan Hale. He introduced himself properly a week later, over coffee. After coming back to the cafe 3 more times, I learned he had retired early after selling his boutique architecture firm and now mentored young designers. He didn't offer anything outright at first, just critique, guidance, and encouragement. That was more than I had ever known. You have an instinct for warmth, he told me. That's rare in architecture. Most people try to impress with edges. You draw breath. I nearly cried. By spring, Nathan offered to sponsor me to attend an international design conference in Chicago. It was the first time I had ever been on a plane, the first time I had worn a blazer that wasn't secondhand, the first time someone introduced me with pride. This is Avery Sinclair. Remember her name. That trip didn't just open doors. It cracked open the roof of every limitation I'd been told to live under. Chicago changed me. At the design conference, I stood in rooms filled with people who spoke my language, not the cold dialect of quarterly earnings and market shares, but the language of light, form, human-centered spaces. I presented my first independent concept, an adaptive reuse plan that turned abandoned factories into community shelters. I didn't win any awards, but a well-known critic from Design Atlas mentioned my name in an article fresh, urgent, emotionally intelligent Sinclair designs like someone who knows what it means to be locked out. That sentence stayed with me for months because it was true. When I returned to Providence, Nathan encouraged me to submit work to more competitions. I poured my heart into proposals between shifts at the cafe and classes. My grades remained strong. I finally moved out of the roach-infested house and into a student co-op with decent plumbing and other young women who understood what it meant to grind for a future no one handed them. It was during this time I met Damien. He was charming in the way people can be when they know exactly what you want to hear. He was in his final year at Brown, studying civil engineering. We were introduced through a mutual classmate at a project review. He praised my presentation, asked questions about structure and materials. He saw the technical side of me, not just the artist. I like that. He started showing up with snacks during my late night studio sessions, walked me home, asked about my ideas, told me I was brilliant. For the first time, I felt seen, loved, even. We became a couple within a month. And for a while, it worked. But slowly, the compliments became comparisons. You know, my program is a lot more rigorous than RISD, he said once, only half joking. When I got invited to speak on a student panel, he pouted, "You're gone every weekend. Don't you want a normal life?" When I told him about my dream to launch my own firm by 25, he laughed. "You think you're going to be Zaha Hadid or something?" The joke stopped being funny. I told myself it was stress, that he was overwhelmed with job hunting, that he'd adjust. Then I missed a period. I'd never known a deeper silence than the one that followed the positive test in my shaking hand. I stared at the 2 lines for a long time, sitting cross-legged on the cold bathroom floor. My breath felt stuck. My future unraveled like unraveling thread. When I told Damien, he went pale. His first response wasn't, "Are you okay, or we'll figure it out?" It was, "Well, this can't happen right now. You have too much going on. We both do." I felt like someone had slammed a door in my chest. When I said I was keeping the baby, he changed. Overnight, he stopped calling, stopped coming by. Then, one day, he left a note at the cafe where I worked. "I'm sorry, I can't do this. Please don't contact me again." That was it. No conversation, no goodbye, just a neatly folded escape. I spent the next few days in a fog, alternating between rage and despair. I was 21, a senior in one of the most competitive programs in the country, alone, broke, pregnant. I debated dropping out. I debated calling my mother, but then I remembered something my professor once said: design is problem solving with beauty. So I opened my sketchbook and tried to draw my way out of the panic. I drew a space for me and my child, a tiny studio with light pouring in, a bookshelf, a crib, a desk. I called it the recovery room. That sketch became a plan. I asked Nathan for help, not for money, but for advice. His first question wasn't, Are you sure it was what do you need? He helped me apply for a single parent scholarship program. He put me in touch with an alum who had navigated RISD while raising twins. He let me work flexible hours at his side firm to earn extra cash. And he never made me feel small when I told my roommates. They surrounded me like scaffolding. One offered to share grocery costs. Another gave me a used crib. Even the girl who never said anything but listened to K-pop all day knitted me a baby blanket. I gave birth in the spring of my final year, a few weeks before graduation. Her name was Lily. She came out screaming, with fierce lungs and a full head of soft brown hair. The moment I held her, every jagged corner of my life shifted into focus. She looked up at me like she already knew how hard I had fought for her. And for myself, I graduated 2 months later with a newborn strapped to my chest and a prototype housing design in my portfolio that would go on to win a Young Designers grant. No one from my family came to the ceremony, but Lily was there, and that made all the difference. The day I received my diploma, Lily slept through the entire ceremony, her tiny hands curled into fists against my chest. I remember looking down at her, this warm, fragile life I had built while rebuilding myself, and realizing I had no idea what came next. All I knew was that I couldn't go back, not to my parents, not to the life they mapped out for me, not to anything that resembled a cage. Instead, I went forward. The Young Designers grant I won that spring, 15,000, and wasn't enough to launch a full firm, but it was seed money, enough to register a business, rent a studio the size of a shoebox, and build a basic website. I called it Lighthouse Studio, not after architecture or aesthetics, after Lily, because she had become my beacon in the dark. I worked from our one-bedroom apartment in Providence. Lily's bassinet sat beside my drafting table, and my white noise machine was the sound of her breathing. I handled every task myself: branding, client meetings, invoices, social media. I worked during nap time and late into the night, answering emails while warming bottles, sketching layouts with one hand, and holding her with the other. At first, clients were scarce. Most were small: a cafe wanting a patio redesign, a yoga studio seeking a minimal makeover. Some didn't pay on time. One ghosted me completely after I delivered plans, but I kept going. I learned fast what to include in contracts, how to set boundaries, how to ask for deposits. Every dollar I made went back into the business. I skipped luxuries: no vacations, no new clothes, no dinners out. I bought design software secondhand and bartered services with a photographer friend for promotional headshots. Then, one day, a miracle walked into my inbox. A real estate firm in Boston wanted to commission an affordable housing pilot, modern, sustainable duplexes in a low-income neighborhood. They had seen one of my sketches published in a local design magazine and wanted someone with a community-first mindset. They didn't know I was 22, or a single mom, or operating out of an apartment nursery. I didn't correct them. I sent in my pitch deck, put Lily in a stroller, and took the commuter train to Boston with nerves so frayed I could barely hold my pen straight in the meeting, but I got the job. 3 months of intense work followed. I collaborated with structural engineers and energy consultants. I conducted interviews with residents of the neighborhood to incorporate their needs. It was the first time I felt like an architect, not just a dreamer or survivor, but a builder. Someone shaping space and community with intention. When the project launched, it got media coverage, small outlets, but real ones. I got tagged on LinkedIn, quoted in articles. My inbox went from silent to flooded. With that came the next challenge: growth. I hired my first assistant, Maya, a grad student I'd mentored in one of Nathan's summer programs. We worked side by side in the studio, and when Lily cried, Maya didn't flinch. She just rocked her stroller with one foot while revising plans. The second hire was harder: an operations manager named Jonah, who helped me organize contracts, track payments, and manage timelines. He was older, calmer, and not intimidated by the fact that his boss was a woman, barely in her mid-20s, with a baby monitor on her desk. Lighthouse Studio began to grow. We moved into a real office. It had chipped walls and creaky floors, but the light streamed in through massive warehouse windows. And we made it ours. We brought in house plants, hand-built desks from salvaged wood, and installed a play area in the back for Lily and any other team members with kids. By the time Lily turned 2, we had completed 8 projects across 3 states. Still, I hadn't heard a word from my parents. Sometimes I wondered if they ever Googled me, if they saw the articles, the photos of ribbon cuttings, or Lily sitting on my hip during a groundbreaking ceremony. Part of me hoped they did. Another part didn't care. Then, one evening, Harper came over for dinner. She'd moved to New York after med school, but visited every few months, always bringing gifts for Lily and strong opinions about my dating life or lack thereof. "You've built something incredible, Avery," she said over Thai takeout and juice boxes. "But you're still carrying that slap like it's a medal." I paused. "What do you mean? I mean, you've proved them wrong 1,000 times over, but you still talk like you're waiting to prove one more thing." She wasn't wrong. My drive hadn't just come from passion. It had come from pain, from the memory of that night, the weight of rejection, the echo of, "You're a disgrace," still ringing in my chest. I wanted to tell her I was over it, but healing doesn't come in a straight line. That night, after Lily fell asleep, I pulled out the sketchbook I hadn't touched in years, the one I carried out of my father's house. The pages were yellowed, the corners curled, but the lines were still mine. I flipped to a drawing labeled The Recovery Room, the one I had made the night I'd decided to keep Lily. It looked different now, and not just in scale, but in purpose. It wasn't just a room anymore. It was a whole life, and I had built it myself. Our studio was humming. Lighthouse had grown from an idea, scribbled in the margins of a sketchbook, to a team of 6 working out of a sunlit office with exposed brick, mismatched chairs, and the smell of strong coffee lingering in every corner. We had landed a string of community redevelopment projects, and Maya, now project lead, kept joking we needed to install bunk beds just to meet deadlines. But it was the Harrison Library renovation that changed everything, a city-funded initiative aimed to transform a crumbling 1960s public library into a modern learning space for underserved youth. It was one of those career-defining opportunities that architects chase for decades. We won the bid. The pitch had been simple: don't just preserve the building, honor its spirit. I proposed keeping the concrete bones, but carving out skylights, replacing steel with reclaimed wood, and incorporating flexible space where students could create, explore, and dream. "Let this be a sanctuary," I said during the final presentation, "not just a library." 2 weeks later, we got the green light, construction began, press followed, local news stations filmed walkthroughs. One evening, I even found myself being interviewed for Design Today Weekly, sitting under harsh studio lights while Lily colored quietly in the background. A month later, I stood in front of the finished library, watching the sunlight fall across a mural painted by neighborhood teens. They had included a tiny lighthouse in the corner, a nod to us. And that's when it happened. That night, my inbox pinged with a subject line that froze me. Mid-bite refeature request, Business Insider, Women Founders issue. I blinked, then read it again. Inside was a short, professional email from an editorial assistant. They were running a piece on women-led firms under 30 and wanted to profile Lighthouse Studio specifically. Me, I laughed out loud and then cried because it was absurd and amazing and terrifying. Me, Avery Sinclair, the same girl who used to duct tape her apartment windows shut, was going to be featured in a national publication. I called Harper first. "You'd better buy 5 copies and frame them." She said, "One for every year you went unseen." The article ran 2 weeks later. It was everything I could have hoped for. Candid photos of Lily and me working together, quotes from Maya and Jonah, a pull quote in bold: "When no one opened doors for me, I built my own." And then the silence broke, not the quiet kind, not the peace you find in early morning light, the kind that comes after something shatters. Because 3 days after the article was published, I received an email from Richard Sinclair and Sinclair Holdings, calm subject: "We need to talk." I stared at it for 10 minutes before clicking. "Avery, I read the article. Your accomplishments are considerable. I'd like to speak with you. I believe it's time. Your mother asks about you constantly, Please consider reaching out. That was it. No apology, no mention of what he'd done, just a businesslike message dressed in half respectful detachment. I closed the laptop and didn't speak for an hour. Lily tugged at my sleeve. Mommy, you okay? I nodded. But I wasn't. Later that night, I pulled out a journal and wrote 3 words. He saw me. But did it matter? Was recognition the same as remorse I didn't know? The next day, I got a phone call from a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer. Is this, is this Avery? The voice was softer, tentative. It was my mother. My throat tightened. Yes. There was a long pause. Then I saw your daughter in the pictures. Lily. Yes, she looks just like you did at that age. Another silence. I think about you every day. She added, I wanted to call sooner, but, but you didn't. I cut in. I was scared of your father, of saying the wrong thing, of hearing your voice and realizing I couldn't undo any of it. Her voice cracked. I'm not calling to excuse what we did, only to say I'm sorry and I miss you. My heart was racing, but my voice was steady. She deserves to know who she came from, but I won't let her near anything that hurts. I understand. We didn't resolve everything in that call. We didn't talk about the slap, the suitcase by the door, or the 7 birthdays she had missed. But it was a beginning. Over the next week, I didn't respond to my father's email. I wasn't ready. Instead, I printed the Business Insider article and mailed it to their house with no note, just a photo of Lily paperclipped to the top. Let him sit with that. Let him read what I had built from the wreckage of his rejection. Let him feel, for once, the silence I carried all these years. And then maybe I'd decide whether that door ever opened again. 3 months after the article, I stood in a conference room overlooking the skyline, surrounded by my team as we reviewed expansion projections. The numbers were strong. Our West Coast clients had nearly tripled. Maya had just closed a deal in Portland. Jonah was pushing for a flagship location in Boston. But there was one more pin on the map, one I had circled and ignored for over a year. Somerset, Connecticut, my hometown. I hadn't set foot there in 7 years. It wasn't personal at first, just practical. There were other markets, easier ones, cities that didn't hold ghosts. But something shifted after that call from my mother. After her voice cracked under the weight of unspoken guilt. After I mailed that article with Lily's photo, I didn't know what I wanted from them. Maybe nothing. But I knew what I wanted for her. She deserved a full picture, even if some parts remained in shadow. That afternoon, I pulled Jonah aside. Add Somerset to our Q3 review. I want to scout properties for a small studio community design, hub style. He blinked. Somerset, as in your Somerset, I nodded. Time to plant some roots where I once got uprooted. His eyes softened. You sure know, I replied honestly. But we'll draft it anyway. A week later, Lily sat beside me on the bed, watching me pack. She carefully folded her favorite stuffed rabbit into my suitcase, like it was a business essential. Where are we going? Mommy, she asked. Someplace I haven't been in a long time. Is it scary a little? I admitted. She thought about that, then smiled. I'll hold your hand. We flew into Hartford on a quiet Thursday morning. The jet, a modest Cessna Citation I co-leased for business travel, landed on a small private runway. Lily squealed with delight as we descended. Are we the only ones on the plane? She whispered. For now. I smiled. Someday. Maybe we'll need a bigger one. The rental car felt absurdly luxurious after my bus rides of years past. As we cruised through Somerset's tree-lined streets, I felt my heartbeat shift into a slower, heavier rhythm. Time hadn't touched the town much. Same diners, same pale blue mailbox on the corner of Main and Franklin. Even the cracks in the sidewalks looked familiar. But I had changed. I wasn't the girl who left crying into her sketchbook. I was Avery Sinclair, CEO, architect, mother. We checked into a boutique hotel downtown. Lily bounced on the bed, her excitement uncontainable. That night, I stood by the window, sipping tea, watching the sun sink behind the low suburban skyline. My phone buzzed. Text from Mom. Maybe I heard you're in town. If you'd like, we're home. No pressure, no guilt, just an open door. I didn't reply, but I stared at the message for a long time. The next morning, I visited 3 potential properties. The second one was promising a former auto garage with high ceilings and exposed beams, perfect for a flexible co-design studio. I took photos, jotted down site notes, already envisioning where the community board would hang, how Lily's reading nook could sit by the front window. She ran around the empty concrete space, giggling, her voice echoing. "I like this one," she said. "Yeah," I smiled. "It feels like you." And just like that, I knew. I'd always thought of home as the place I was forced to leave, but maybe it was also the place I could return to on my own terms and remake entirely. That afternoon, we stopped at the town's small art supply store. The clerk didn't recognize me, which felt like a small relief. I bought a new sketchbook and let Lily pick out her own set of markers. "Can we visit your old house?" she asked on the way back. I hadn't planned to, but I said yes. 12 minutes later, we parked outside the colonial-style home where I'd once been slapped and silenced. The white paint had yellowed. The shutters were peeling. The rose bushes my mother once trimmed obsessively had overgrown, leaning into the sidewalk like they, too, had given up perfection. Lily squeezed my hand. "This is where you grew up." I nodded. "It doesn't look scary, not anymore. We sat in the car for a while. I wasn't sure if I was waiting for courage or an invitation. Then, as if summoned by memory, the front door opened. My mother stepped onto the porch. She looked older, smaller, but not unfamiliar. She didn't wave, didn't call out. She just stood there and waited. Lily looked up at me. "Can I say hi?" I took a breath. "Let's go together." The crunch of gravel under Lily's shoes was the only sound as we stepped onto the Sinclair property. The wind stirred gently through the overgrown rose bushes, brushing against the shutters like ghost fingers. I could feel the weight of every step pressing through the soles of my shoes, like the house itself remembered me. My mother still stood on the porch. She looked hesitant, not like a gatekeeper, but like someone surprised the door had opened at all. When we reached the steps, Lily let go of my hand and climbed up first. "Hi," she said simply. "I'm Lily. I'm 5." My mother's hand flew to her chest. Her eyes welled instantly. She crouched slowly, like her knees hadn't done that in years. "Hi, Lily," she whispered. I'm your Grandma Linda." Lily nodded, thoughtful. "You look like Mommy in the face, but older." That made my mother laugh, a wet, fragile laugh like glass about to crack. She looked up at me. "Avery," I met her gaze, "and we won't stay long." She nodded. "That's okay." Inside, the house smelled like old books and lemon polish. Not much had changed. Same beige carpet, same portraits on the walls, though I noticed one missing my high school graduation photo. The empty space where it once hung was now filled by a landscape painting. Safe, neutral. She offered us water. I declined. Lily curled up on the couch, flipping through a basket of old children's books, like she'd always belonged there. And then I heard it, the sound of deliberate, heavy steps from the hallway. I didn't need to look up. I felt the air shift, and then he was there. Richard Sinclair, gray around the temples now, thinner, his jaw, once perpetually set in stone, now slightly sloped with age. He froze when he saw me. His eyes traveled from my face to Lily. I stood. He opened his mouth. "Don't," I said. He shut it. The silence that followed was dense, not absence, but pressure. Lily looked up. "Are you Grandpa?" He blinked. "Yes," he said slowly. "I am." "Did you make Mommy cry?" she asked without hesitation. I flinched. My mother inhaled sharply. He stared at Lily as though the question had shattered something deep inside. "Yes," he said again, voice barely audible. "I did." Lily nodded solemnly. "You should say sorry." He looked at me, then back at her. "I know. I just don't know if it would help. It helps me when I say it," she replied matter-of-factly, then went back to her book. I walked past him, into the dining room, once the battlefield of my teenage years. The table was smaller than I remembered, the chandelier dimmer. He followed. "I saw your article." He began. Business Insider and the TV interview. I didn't answer. You've done well. Is that what you call it? I asked, finally meeting his eyes. He didn't flinch. What would you call it? Survival, reinvention, becoming everything you told me I'd never be. He nodded. And you did it. Without help, without us. You're right, I said coldly. I did. I know I can't undo what I did to you. I crossed my arms. Say it. He blinked. Say what you did. I I slapped you. I waited. I kicked you out. He continued, like dragging words from a frozen lake, because I didn't like your choices, because I thought you were making a mistake. You didn't just think I was wrong. I said, you decided I didn't belong. You made me disappear from this house, from your version of the family. He swallowed. I was raised to believe obedience was love, that structure was safety. I was your daughter. I interrupted. Not your employee, not your investment. You hurt me, Dad. And then you didn't speak to me for 7 years. Silence again. Then I was ashamed. He said, of myself, not of you, but I didn't know how to fix it. So I chose silence. That was your second betrayal. He looked like he'd been punched. I didn't care. Not anymore. In the kitchen, my mother was gently showing Lily how to fold a napkin into a swan. I stepped closer. Mom, I said, I need to ask you something. She turned, cautious. Did you know what he was going to do that night? Her shoulders sank. No, I thought he'd yell. Maybe take away your phone. I didn't know he would hit you. I didn't think he'd actually throw you out. But you let it happen. Tears filled her eyes. I was weak. I've spent 7 years regretting that moment. Then say it. She looked at Lily, then back at me. I'm sorry I didn't protect you. I'm sorry I let fear make me a stranger to my own daughter. I should have followed you that night. I should have chosen you. I didn't cry. I just nodded. Thank you. I said, that night, I didn't stay. I packed Lily into the rental and drove back to the hotel, but I left behind a sketch. Not for them, for myself, a new blueprint one with room for pain, truth, and a doorway that opens both ways. Back at the hotel. Lily curled up in bed beside me, her fingers wrapped around the hem of my sleeve. I stared at the ceiling for hours, wide awake in the dim glow of the reading lamp, every nerve in my body humming with something I couldn't quite name: grief, clarity, maybe both. I had walked into that house expecting confrontation, distance, maybe even another version of rejection. What I got instead was a hollow attempt at atonement, one that came years too late and without a map for what came next. And yet, when my father admitted he was ashamed not of me, but of himself, something inside me shifted. Not forgiveness, not yet, but space, like a room that had been locked up for so long, suddenly cracked a window. Still, I wasn't ready to hand them back the key. That morning, Lily stirred beside me, blinking sleepily. Are we going to see Grandma again today? I paused. Not today, sweetie. Okay. She didn't protest, just rolled onto her side and fell back asleep. I watched her, thinking of all the things I'd chosen to carry and all the things I was finally learning to put down. Maybe healing wasn't some perfect reunion or a grand apology. Maybe it was something quieter, a redrawing of the lines, a reframing of the story. I opened my laptop and pulled up our expansion plan. The Somerset studio was scheduled to break ground in 2 weeks. It would sit on the corner of Willow and 3rd, 2 blocks from where I used to catch the school bus. The irony wasn't lost on me. I flipped to my digital notebook and started sketching. Open concept, softwoods, play area in the lobby, a sunken meeting circle where ideas could be shared at eye level. I designed it not just as a studio, but as a space of restoration for clients, for my team, and for anyone who'd ever been told they didn't belong in the room. A few days later, I met with the contractors on site. Jonah flew in from Boston, hard hat in hand, and Maya joined via tablet. Lily occasionally popping into frame to show her a rock or a bug she'd found nearby. This is your full circle moment, Jonah said, standing next to me in the gravel lot. I smiled. No, it's a new circle. Because full circle meant ending where I began, and I wasn't here to end anything. I was here to rebuild. That afternoon, I received a text from my mother. We'd love to take Lily to the local fair next weekend if you're okay with that. I stared at it for a long time before replying, she can go if I come too, and if boundaries are respected. Her response came quickly. Of course, we want to earn back your trust, not assume it. I breathed out slowly. Progress, not perfection. That weekend, we went to the fair together. Lily rode the carousel twice, then dragged Richard by the hand to the face painting booth. I watched as he knelt beside her, letting her pick a purple butterfly for his cheek. The sight almost made me laugh. My father, the man who once defined dignity by tailored suits and power ties, now sporting glitter. Linda brought lemonade and tissues, as if anticipating the emotional mess before it arrived. She didn't try to mother me. She didn't ask for explanations. She just sat beside me on the picnic bench and said quietly, "You're incredible. You know that I'm still angry." I whispered, "I know," she replied. "You don't owe us anything, but you've given us a second chance anyway. That's more grace than I deserve." I didn't respond, but I didn't move away either. Lily ran back to me later with a ribbon in her hand. "I won this in the drawing contest," she beamed. "What did you draw?" I asked. She held it up. A crayon sketch of a building with a heart above it. It's Mommy's new office and with a place for kids. So no one feels left out. I swallowed hard. When we returned to the hotel, I sat with Lily as she colored and pulled out my own journal. For the first time in years, I didn't write about pain. I wrote about choice. I chose to leave. I chose to survive. I chose to build something from what broke me. And now, I choose what to let in and what to leave behind. That night, after Lily fell asleep, I stared at a photo Harper had texted me. Our team gathered under the construction banner at the Somerset site, hard hats crooked, arms linked, joy unfiltered. And in that moment, I knew I wasn't returning to reclaim anything. I was here to redefine everything. A year later, I stood at the entrance of the Lighthouse Somerset studio, dressed in a navy blazer and sneakers, watching the ribbon flutter in the morning breeze. The opening ceremony was simple by design, no press, no speeches, just the people who mattered, my team, our first clients, the neighbors who helped build it, and the children who would one day fill it with noise and color. Lily stood next to me, clutching a pair of golden scissors, almost too big for her hands. "Ready, kiddo?" I asked. She nodded, beaming. We cut the ribbon together. Cheers erupted. She turned to the crowd. "This is Mommy's dream place. But there's also snacks inside." Everyone laughed. Inside, the space buzzed with warmth. Natural light poured through floor-to-ceiling windows. Soft wood beams framed every room. A reading nook wrapped around the front corner like a hug. In the middle, a sunken conversation pit glowed with amber light, a space for big thoughts and little feet. It didn't feel like redemption. It felt like arrival. Jonah gave me a mock salute. "Boss, I think this might be the most you place we've ever made. Because it's not about me," I replied. "It's about everyone who never got invited in." That afternoon, we held our first community workshop co-designing a pop-up library for the local park. Parents sat beside their kids, tracing out ideas. Maya led the session via live stream from Portland, Lily at her side holding up samples, and in the back row sat my parents, not front and center, not in control, just present, watching, trying. At one point, Lily wandered over to my father. He crouched beside her as she handed him a crayon. "Draw with me," she said. He hesitated, then did. It was awkward. It was imperfect, but it was real. Later that evening, after the workshop, we stood together in the hallway, just the three of us. Me, my father, and my mother. Richard cleared his throat. "I saw your name on the donor plaque outside. Avery Sinclair, founder." I raised an eyebrow. "Is that a problem?" He shook his head. "No, it's fitting. You built this." My mother touched the wall beside her. "I used to think your success would make me feel guilty, but now I just feel proud and lucky that you let us witness it." I didn't respond right away. Then I said, "This doesn't erase what happened." They nodded. "But I'm willing to write a new chapter 1 that begins now, and Lily will decide how much of the past she carries forward. That's her right." They didn't argue that night. As Lily drifted off beside me, I stared at the ceiling of our new home just 2 blocks from the studio. Not the Sinclair house. A new house, ours. I opened my journal. New rules, new roots, new legacy. This time, I wasn't building to prove anything. I was building to belong to myself, to my daughter, to a future I shaped with my own hands. I thought about the girl I used to be, the one standing on that curb with a suitcase, the one who walked away without a plan, only a sketchbook, and a name she refused to give up. She wouldn't recognize the woman I had become, and yet I had never been closer to her. The following summer, Somerset hosted its first regional design fair, and our studio was invited to present as one of the anchor exhibits. It wasn't a massive event, mostly local artists, community leaders, and students. But for me, it was a quiet culmination, a kind of homecoming I had written for myself. Lily wore a navy jumpsuit and badge that said Assistant Architect. She took the role seriously, giving tours of our interactive model and explaining which parts she had helped Mommy fix. I watched her beam with confidence and curiosity, completely unaware that she was standing in the very town that had once treated her mother like an afterthought. And then came the moment I knew it would happen eventually. Through the crowd, I spotted a group of familiar faces approaching some of my father's old colleagues, members of the board he used to chair at the local firm, men and women who had once shaken their heads when I walked away from the Ivy League path, who'd muttered about wasted potential and disobedience. They hadn't seen me in nearly a decade. And now, they stopped in front of our booth. I stood calmly behind the display with my team. Then Lily looked up, pointed excitedly, and shouted, "That's my mommy, she owns this place." Silence fell. I stepped forward, extended a hand to the man who once called me a cautionary tale. "Nice to see you again. Mr. Hartwell," I said, "welcome to Lighthouse." He blinked. "Avery." "Yes," I replied, smiling. "We're the lead sponsors this year." They didn't speak, didn't know what to say, and just like that, they froze. Exactly as I remembered. But this time, I wasn't the one shrinking. I wasn't the girl trying to earn a seat. I was the seat. I turned and walked away, joining Lily at the model table, showing her how to fold an accordion roof out of paper. Later that day, I took her hand and we walked toward the grassy hill behind the exhibit center. It was quiet there, overlooking the town, the same skyline I had once memorized from my childhood bedroom window. "I like it here," Lily said, lying back in the grass. "I'm glad," I replied. She looked at me. "Do you think I'll build something one day too?" I smiled. "You already are." She wrinkled her nose. "No, I mean, like a big thing." I thought about everything I'd built: businesses, buildings, boundaries. And then I said, "The biggest thing you'll ever build is the life you want to live. Everything else is just walls and windows." She was quiet and then whispered, "That's kind of beautiful." I laughed. "You're kind of brilliant." That evening, after the fair ended and we packed up, I sat on the front porch of our home. Lily had fallen asleep with marker stains on her cheeks and glitter in her hair. The stars hung low above Somerset, familiar but kinder now. My phone buzzed. A message from my dad. "Thank you for letting us be there. Proud of you" doesn't begin to cover it. I stared at the text, then typed back, "Thank you for showing up. It matters. I didn't need more, not because it was perfect, but because I was free. Free from needing their approval, free from old narratives, free to be exactly who I was on my terms." On my timeline, I opened my sketchbook, the last page blank. At the top, I wrote, "They froze." Then underneath, in softer letters, "But I kept walking." Because in the end, this wasn't a story about rejection. It was about returning stronger, wiser, and unshakably whole, not to reclaim space, but to create a new one entirely. And I had, brick by brick, word by word, step by step,